All right, there we go. Now everything's working. It's good when it starts working. Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to have you here this morning. Let me just talk to you a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about knowledge transfer. And so the title of this webinar is The Critical Role of Knowledge Transfer in the Project Environment. And this is, if you're not familiar with PMBOK 7, this is one of the pieces of PMBOK 7 that PMI really pushed into our community for the project management knowledge base. And so in PMBOK 7, you know that PMBOK 6 was still process driven. PMBOK 7 is system driven. And so you'll notice that it's a lot thinner. It gives you more, it functions more like a handbook than it does anything else. But one of the emphasis that they've made is on this idea of knowledge transfer. Now, many of us have had the exposure to knowledge transfer from kind of a negative standpoint. If you worked with some vendors and they kind of dump it and have that dump and drop kind of mindset, or throw the project at you. This is to kind of counteract some of those pieces. This has also been increased on the PMP certification. PMI now asks us several questions about knowledge transfer. And so the mindset that we're getting ready to show you here is that the idea of when you start coming down to the end of your project, knowledge transfer is actually part of your project. And so you're looking at training your people. You might even feel like when we talk about training, you think, oh my gosh, who's doing that? Well, this would be the project team. They're the experts transferring it over. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of things here. So the title today is going to be the critical role of knowledge transfer in project environments. So let's start off with a couple of ideas on this. So how bad is ineffective knowledge transfer? This is always a cry that comes out from organizations. So I don't have to be there very long before we start talking about projects, and especially where a vendor is handing off the project, people are usually pretty critical about the knowledge transfer. But in the last probably 4 or 5 years, we've started hearing more and more about the internal transfer of knowledge. People who are doing it internally, it might be the IT department handing it off, but they assume that people know a lot more than what they do. So the IT people are not purposely not transferring knowledge, but what they know as an IT professional compared to the business side usually will hurt a little bit. So one study note that is the construction industry, ineffective knowledge transfer, failure to learn from past projects can result in a rework cost of 35% of the total project cost, contributing to as much as 50% of the cost overrun. Now, I like this because construction projects have really been interwoven now more into PMI than ever before. And that's one of the reasons why I like this so well, is this idea of even in construction projects, you're transferring knowledge over, regardless of what you're building out here or constructing, you're needing to transfer knowledge over even in those type of projects. All right, so why would we worry then about knowledge transfer? First, it ensures proper use of deliverables. So even the most well-designed solution fails if the end user doesn't know how to operate it, how to maintain it, and how to adapt it. And it's this maintenance piece that so many times people will talk about that they think that this is why people are not investing in that knowledge transfer. So if I'm a vendor doing it on the outside, I really don't have a ton of motivation to transfer that knowledge of that project to you because I'm hoping to be called back to help maintain that project or to do something else. And so that's the reason why we're having to think more strategically about the knowledge transfer maybe than ever before, because what we're really trying to do is we're really trying to look at it as part of the project, not an afterthought. So knowledge transfer ensures the end user can apply the solution intended and maximize value. But the big thing is so that the knowledge is actually on the side of the user rather than on the side of the vendor or on the side of IT. So we're wanting to watch that. It reduces support and maintenance costs. We already know that. We already anticipate that. So a well-trained, well-informed end user reduces dependency on the project team support services. Your people are able to fix a range of things if something goes wrong. They're able to understand the system. They're able to understand the software, whatever it is that we're doing in that project and shifting it over. It prevents reoccurring troubleshooting and requests and post-deployment errors. And of course, you're talking about money and all of this and time because you're trying to bring people back to help you fix something after the project is over. So all of these are absolutely going to be going to deliver value if we can transfer it, and it's a lack of value if we don't transfer it. Also, it drives end user adoption and satisfaction. Comprehensive training and demonstration increases confidence, leading to faster adoption, higher satisfaction with the project's outcome. And of course, once again, the customer, if we're a vendor, the customer is going to feel like they're getting greater value because that's part of that transfer. And so it's one thing to hire a vendor back because you want to. It's another thing because you feel like you don't have a choice. And that's what we're wanting to get away from, is that feeling to where I don't have a choice. I have to hire that vendor back because we don't know anything about the system, or even the basic stuff we might not know. Now, if you're a vendor on here, you're not liking what I say. I'm a vendor too. But our goal should be, as a vendor, is people are hiring us back because they want us back for our expertise. They want us back because of what we bring to the table, not because we purposely left something out. Now, on the side of the customer, let me chase this rabbit for a moment and just make sure you hear this. We need to be more strategic on the customer side of demanding what that knowledge transfer is going to look like, what the specifics of it's going to be, and when it's going to start. It's almost like an additional portion of a phase of a project, because you're wanting your people to be trained. And we're not talking about a 1 hour meeting. That's not training. We're talking about that if you've got new software, your people need to understand the processes and how to be able to run that software effectively. And so that's one of the pieces that we have to get into a lot of times, and that has to be planned as part of that entire project, process, and that entire project handoff that we're going to be doing. Okay, so minimizing operational risks. Why is it a risk? Well, your people, you've paid for a project, your vendor has done a project, they've handed it off. The expectation is your people can run this thing. And then the problem is oh my gosh, it's not, it's not going to be able to be run. Nobody's been trained in it. And so we have basic knowledge, but not the expertise we need for this level. One of the movies that we watched that I thought was so good, and I can't think of it right now, what the name of it is. And of course, I'm going to use it as an example when I can't think of it. But it was a movie where the ladies were the three ladies were working for NASA, and they were the computers, if you remember this movie. And so they were the computers. And so one of the things I thought that was so interesting is they showed on the movie that they introduced the computer to NASA. And so when they did that, that was one of the things. Let me see if anybody told me what it was in the chat. So it takes everybody to do my sessions. So let me just see if anybody told me in chat what it was. Let me see here real quick. Hidden Figures. Thank you so much. That brain cell died right in the middle of it. I apologize. But Hidden Figures, I thought, was one of the greatest movies of all time. But the thing I liked about it was if you remember the scene in the movie, IBM, they brought the IBM computer in, and it was all clumsy because nobody had ever messed with a mainframe computer before. And the one lady went up there and behind the scenes and learned how to work it because she could see the future, saying, you know what, if we don't learn how to work this, we're all going to be out of a job. And she started training people. And what's so cool about that was that transfer of knowledge. Once she learned, she started training the other ladies that worked with her. But what I thought was even interesting is she actually was showing the people who were setting it up how it should be running because they couldn't get it to work. And so I say all of that to say that knowledge transfer, that freedom of knowledge transfer is needed, and it's very powerful when we do that. All of us have benefited from it, and all of us probably have examples of where people did not transfer the knowledge. All right, next, let's talk a little bit about it protects organizational reputation. When we finish a training, I want people to like what we've done. I want people to feel like they've gotten value. That should be the role of every vendor, and every vendor should have that mindset. On the customer side, we should be looking for the value of what we've gotten from that vendor as well, and we should be measuring that value. And knowledge transfer is one of those things that we can actually measure. Because once again, you've got the vendor and you've got your people. Can they do what the vendor has showed them to do? Not just an orientation, not just a meeting, but literally, can they do those particular things? So it helps that reputation from the vendor, but it also helps our reputation that we've thought this thing through and didn't allow the vendor to just do a dump and drop kind of thing at the end. And if you're a vendor, I'm not trying to be disrespectful because I'm a vendor too, but so many times you hear it over and over again from so many different customers. All right, introduction and foundations for knowledge transfer. So first off, one of the things that you're going to see, and this is actually going to increase because of the background behind AI, and those of you who are already starting to work with AI, you know what I'm talking about, knowledge repositories. Every organization typically has this. And this is going to be even more pressure on knowledge repositories as we start bringing in cognitive project management, and we start bringing in other types of trying to do our own AI tool for our organization. But creating the knowledge repository, regardless of working with an internal team or a vendor, you've got to be able to have a knowledge repository for that project that we're going to have to transfer that knowledge from. Project knowledge repositories need to be centralized storage, either on shared drives or in the cloud. Most of us have something like that. Catalog documents, information for easy retrieval. This is going to be a bigger deal in the next 18 months because you're going to see the rollout of cognitive project management, which is a new certification that PMI has just rolled out, and it deals with cognitive projects for AI. And so it's how do you implement artificial intelligence within your organization. Now, the reason I'm talking about that certification, I'm in the middle of training for it right now because I'm going to take the certification. Haven't taken it yet, but I'm in the middle of the training for that. But it's called Cognitive Project Management for AI. And so that the emphasis of that is running an AI type of project, okay? But all of you who already know this, that AI behind the scenes is going to be tapping into knowledge. Right now, OpenAI, we're using internet for the most part. But companies that are actually doing this and getting this going are actually using it behind their firewalls inside their company, and they're tapping into these knowledge repositories. And so our knowledge repositories, which maybe has been a second thought with our projects, have to be something that's on the front end. That's going to emphasize not only the AI portion of it, but it's going to emphasize the transfer of knowledge from those repositories to our people and to our teams. So cost of lost knowledge. I thought this was really interesting. This is 2015, so we're talking about 9 years ago, and I'm anxious to see the newer material that comes out. But cost of lost knowledge, and so cost per year as you start looking at number of organizations, and so you look at some organizations all the way up to $50 million of lost knowledge. And so PMI's research shows that poor communication, knowledge gaps are major contributors to project failure, and projects without structured knowledge transfer see higher costs, delays, and rework. Now, many of you have already lived through this, and that's not pointing a finger at any of us. We've just lived through it where that transfer of knowledge was not as thorough as what we had either hoped for or we thought it was, or we lost that person. We did it with one person, and that person ended up moving and going someplace else to work, and now our knowledge walked out the door, and that just drives us nuts. Many of you talk about that when people were retiring, the exact same thing. All right, so the cost of lost knowledge, rework delays, all of that would be looked at as waste. Though all of you that are on the quality side, you know what I'm talking about. Critical project knowledge is lost. Teams often duplicate efforts, repeat mistakes, and that increases our labor costs, extends timelines. It reduces quality, it reduces innovation. Loss of technical insights, decision rationale, lessons learned can lower solution quality, hinder creative problem solving. And we live through this because we see the lower quality. And we do the best we can with what we have, but the problem is so many times we are doing rework, and we do have a delay because of lack of knowledge. And sometimes we are bringing the vendor back because that we're going to get the vendor back who put the system in because we need that another piece of that expertise. It was not transferred over. So that's one of the challenges that we see is that how much lost knowledge do we have that was not actually documented, put into a repository or something like that. Also, onboarding inefficiencies. New team members require more time, resources to reach full productivity when prior knowledge is inaccessible, impacting project momentum and outcomes. Sometimes we want to wave that magic wand, don't we, and just have somebody onboarded and have them have a knowledge of our organization, and they're just not. I mean, they don't know. They might know project management, be an expert, and I do this a lot of times when we're when inside the company. I know project management, but I don't know your form of project management because nobody is a purist in using that project management methodology. And every one of us have those weird things that we have to deal with within our structure. We have certain cultures and certain type of processes. And it doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree, you got to jump through it, some of those places a certain way. And so that's one of the inefficiencies that takes a while for people to learn. Now, defining knowledge transfer. When we're talking about knowledge transfer, it can include a broad sense of things, but someone has a piece of knowledge and they are transferring it to the recipient. And so what happens is that you're taking it from one entity to another. Many of you who are seeing a lot of coaching programs are very popular today. That's what people are trying to do is take that tacit knowledge that coach understands and pass it on to that person so that they are able to get up and be able to understand something that's happening or understand how to run something or how to be able to function in a certain way. And so you're getting that tacit knowledge from them. So tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge. This has a bigger emphasis on the PMP certification today now than ever before. But tacit knowledge, if you're not familiar with that term, it's experience-based. So it's harder to document because it is experience based. Every vendor you bring in brings in tacit knowledge. Even I do. And so, in 2006, I got my PMP. This is our 32nd year running projects. I have tacit knowledge. So when I'm coaching people since 2006 about how to pass the PMP, I'm telling them what I understand about the PMP, what it is today, which is totally different than it was in 2006, and what we know is happening to the test, and what we know is happening to the culture, and how they're shifting things. And even though they made changes in 2022, they've made multiple changes since 2022 that were not as drastic, that will still cause people to answer questions differently than they did even in 2022. Tacit knowledge based from me, I share it verbally in the boot camps, or if I'm an experienced project manager, I'm sharing a lot of it verbally, teaching people, coaching people. All of you use tacit knowledge and have benefited from it. Explicit knowledge is the exact opposite of that, though. Explicit knowledge means it's been codified, it's been documented. Looking at my slides, getting the video, that's something that you're able to see. And even though I'm talking about those, I'm giving you some kind of resource for you to be able to see. That's going to be on the explicit knowledge. When you come to a boot camp, or when you come to a training program and you get a notebook, for an example, that's going to be on the explicit knowledge side. Somebody has put it into notes for you. So tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge have become very, very important here. So when we talk about tacit versus explicit, tacit knowledge, it's deeply personal. It's hard to formalize. It could be problem solving. It could even be almost like an intuition because of that person's experience. On the explicit side, it's knowledge that's written, codified, easy to read, see, hear in various books, articles, training. So let me give you an example. So we get into a lot of times, both of these have to be addressed in a project environment, but a lot of times, we actually are using both, and we've intermingled them. I'll give you a good example of this. We actually kind of intermingle this on YouTube. So if you've ever fixed anything around your house or in your car using YouTube, I don't know how you guys do it, but I mean, I'm not very good on some of this stuff and don't know a lot about it, but I'll watch 5 or 6 YouTube videos on something and determine then whether or not I think this is worth calling a repairman or whether I should do it. And sometimes I should have called a repairman. Let me just tell you ahead of time. They did it in 20 minutes, and 3 hours later, it still wasn't working for me. So, but if you look at YouTube, like most of us have to pick up some piece of knowledge, we're looking at it from a tacit side. That's an experienced plumber who's doing that. But they might be showing you step by step. And so that video actually becomes explicit because we are able to watch it over and over again. And many of you maybe have done like I have. I've had my computer up there and I'm doing it step by step through that silly process. And so I watch that part of the video and I do that. And then I go back and watch the next piece of the video and do that. So you've got those of you who know how to work on all this stuff, you're probably laughing. You're thinking, Mathis, shut up and move on. That is stupid. But I do. I mean, that's one of the things with YouTube, which has just been such an enormous piece of knowledge for the world in being able to do some things. All right, so let's talk about some of the theories then in transferring knowledge, theories and models. So one of the first is, we're going to talk about a couple of these. And so this would be Wenger's Community of Practice. This is the Community of Practice. You'll see the acronym COP a lot of times. It's starting to come up. But Wenger's Community of Practice, Kolb's experiential learning theory, and NASA's knowledge retention model. Now, there's several more than this, but I wanted to just emphasize some to say you're not just doing transfer of knowledge on a wing and a prayer. There are some theories and models of how to be able to transfer some of that knowledge over. So let's start with Wenger's Community of Practice. You'll notice they've got the community, they've got practice, they've got the domain there. And so one of the pieces that you see of this is that it's almost like understanding best practices. We share freely. We talk through these things freely. We're not held up by any of these pieces. So let's look at the strengths of Wenger's, just to kind of give you an example here, even though there's multiple theories. So it facilitates tacit knowledge. Now, remember, where's tacit coming from? It's coming from that expert. Sharing through peer interaction, storytelling, that person sharing how to be able to do whatever that function is, or whatever that behavior is, or whatever that output is, because they've done it so many times. It builds trust, collaboration. It's an informal kind of relationship. It encourages also continuous learning for people because you're talking to the expert. And so this is a very powerful model to be able to use, because that person who is the expert is able to kind of walk you through some things to do But what we typically do too is what are some things that we don't want to do? And they'll even warn us of some of those. It's psychologically safe. You encourage honest exchange, and people are able to ask questions in the areas that they have gaps. What's the weakness of something like this? Lack of formal structure. The way the person's telling them is the way they think it's best, and it might be, but a lot of times we're wired differently. And so variable participant levels, which depends on voluntary involvement, it can result in inconsistent knowledge flow. Well, a lot of times what happens is I hear what I hear you, but if I'm not doing it right at that moment, I'm really might not be listening as intently as what I should. And the risk of knowledge silos, which unintentionally limit cross functional knowledge sharing. So what happens so many times is we've got certain knowledge here, but we haven't been able to pass it outside of our silo. And so, like for an example, you'll see that in IT sometimes. The IT people know all this stuff, but many times it hasn't been passed to the customer for some reason. All right, so the other one is going to be Cobb's experiential learning theory. If you're an adult learner and have gone through school as an adult for your bachelor's or master's degree or doctorate, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So this is experiential. You do something to be able to learn this. And so many of you who follow through, you doing some kind of experience, this is where it might be the way you learn the best. So concrete experience, abstract conceptualizations, active experimentation, reflective observation. And so you learn by doing. And so those of you who are using Agile, you actually use a component of this in your Agile process, because every 2 or 3 weeks you're handing something off to the customer, and it's so iterative, and you do your retrospective at the end of Agile, and so you're learning from that retrospective every time. So this is kind of interwoven there. Even though nobody talks about Cobb per se in Agile, you're doing some of these steps in that same sequence. So let's look at the strength of this. So Cobb's experiential learning theory, ELT, it's practical, it's applicable by linking learning and real life experiences, making it fit in project-based work. It encourages reflection by promoting a more profound understanding, allowing participants to review and evaluate their actions. It supports multiple learning styles by recognizing people learn differently and adapt accordingly. So it has a great deal of strengths. People do and can learn, and it's very broad to be able to accommodate a lot of different type of learning styles. What's the weakness? It's going to be time intensive, which makes this hard in a fast-paced project environment. You're under pressure for time all the time. Regardless of what your method is for your project, you're under pressure. And you always need more time. It needs to be done yesterday. It always is. So they assume learner is ready to be able to learn. And so that depends on the individual being willing to and able to reflect critically on the experience. And once again, it goes back to, do I need that information right then? If I'm listening to you about the information, but I don't need it for 3 months, am I going to listen differently than if I'm using it in the morning? Totally different, of course. And so that's what it really refers to. They may overlook cultural differences. As we do that even in industries. The industry of government is going to be different than the power plant. The industry of the power plant is going to be different than the factory. And so you're looking at different industries and how that culture would play a role in some of these things. So it could limit the model effectiveness based on the team is different and they react different in those ways. So let's look at NASA. NASA's knowledge retention model. This has been one that was used recently. I had a doctoral student who was writing his dissertation on replacing the International Space Station. And so I'd seen this years ago, but I thought it was really interesting, especially for being able to pass that knowledge along. And so in this particular retention model, they talk about the project starting, all the milestones, which are knowledge gates as well, because each milestone we complete, we'd be passing knowledge over to the user. And then, of course, the project would close. And so I loved it because I thought it's very simple, and you're doing it in piecemeal. You're passing knowledge over. You're not passing it all over at the end, which is sometimes over too much material for somebody to be able to learn in too many experiences. So what's the strength of NASA's retention model? Practitioner-centered, contextual, notice the special project or circumstances for each. Holistic, it can be balanced through knowledge management. That's what the KM stands for. Processes, it focuses on continual knowledge and innovation. It's federated governance structure. It's freedom to customize, look at flexibility. You can have layered learning architecture. Knowledge comes through direct experiences. intervention and oriented design. You have real-time knowledge helping to target improvements. So it has a lot of strengths, a lot of positive. And that's one of the reasons why NASA uses it with so many situations and projects they're working with. What's the weakness? Very descriptive, and so it's not prescriptive. Much of the model exists as a descriptive framework rather than a detailed implementation guide, because once again, things are evolving. And so it's not the idea that you're going to have a best practice of these 7 steps might not be the best thing to think of, because once again, it's evolving. And it might even be hitting a moving target out here. And so it might be different. So one NASA model is going to be different potentially than the other. So the model doesn't provide specific metrics or maturity pathways, which can complicate efforts to assess knowledge management effectiveness over time. So it's very kind of a short view of how to get things done rather than a long view of did we do it right and not have to redo something. Autonomy without strong accountability mechanisms. So it has some weaknesses that some organizations might love the weaknesses because it fits your culture better, but it might not. So that's your NASA knowledge retention model. So tacit knowledge systems often rely heavily on personal relationships, informal exchanges, which may be unstable under turnover or remote working conditions. So what it kind of comes down to with that point is, if I like you and you like me and we're connected, I might share more with you than I would some other person. I might share just the bare bones, the skeleton with one person, and share more detail with you because I like you. You connect. You seem interested. You're hungry for that information. The other person kind of rubs me the wrong way, and maybe I don't like the person, so I might not go the extra mile to pass that on. It would be very subjective from my standpoint in measuring those two. Also, professional identity, cultural resistance can hinder knowledge sharing. You've got some settings where people say, I can't do any of these steps because our organizational culture and processes prevent that. And those are challenges, no doubt about it. And those challenges might need to actually be challenged to change some of that, because once again, you're going to be trying to do things differently, not only right now, for those of you who are bringing in agile and hybrid, but in 18 months, as you start bringing in and start trying to do a project to install AI, if you do that project like just a regular software development project, you're going to be challenged. And right now, all the statistics that are coming out is something right around 80% of all AI projects are failing because we're trying to run them like a software development project. And it's not. And the reason it's not is because you've got some anchored things in a software development project, and AI is evolving so fast, you're hitting not only a moving target, which is also hitting moving targets, and you don't even know what the new technology is going to be when it comes down the road. So those are some of the things that we're looking at and trying to transfer that knowledge on over to that. Now let's talk about some methodologies for transferring the knowledge, okay, for knowledge transfer. All right, so PMI gave you a knowledge management framework. And so I like the graphic because it goes through all the major pieces of knowledge. But if you look at it too, it also breaks it down into the major components that we're used to seeing in a PMBOK role. And so for an example, every one of these, if you're doing traditional projects, typically you've got a plan for each of these. So you've got an integration management plan, scope, cost, quality, communication, procurement, risk, and that should be, I don't know what that should be. That's all garbled right there. But the point is, you typically have an output of a plan for every one of these. Now let's go to the next piece, theories and practice. So you have initiation, planning, execution. So you might have a very streamlined project environment. And so you might need to go in a direction of, for an example, case studies. And so you have a case study for initiating that type of project to where that knowledge can be passed over. The case study might be developed and led by the person who has the tacit knowledge or the vendor. And then when you go into planning, you might have another case study that is part of it. And then, of course, execution, the same thing. So you might be passing over in bite-sized pieces with this, and the documentation could be the case study created by the person with the tacit knowledge. That's one way that people are doing that. That might not bring value to your situation or to your people. So practical planning for knowledge transfer. So let's get started at the beginning of this one more time. So transfer of knowledge process approach. So you start off with planning, you're delivering it, you're verifying it, you're transitioning it, and then you're offboarding all of this. Now, we're not talking about project here in the sense of these are not project steps. This is just the process for transferring knowledge. And so you're planning how you're going to educate your people with this new knowledge. You're delivering that training, you're delivering that coaching, you're verifying. How are you going to verify your people know how to do that? And then you're transitioning the authority from the project team over to your user and your people that's there within your organization, or from the vendor to your people. And then, of course, you're getting rid of your vendor, and your people are now taking on and doing all of this themselves. So under planning, you're determining what the user needs to know, showing both operational or troubleshooting levels, deciding on the format, schedules, the workshops. So this feels very much almost like a training class, and the truth is, it is. When you with what PMI has added to PMBOK 7 and even to the PMP, it does you feel like you're the director of training, scheduling training classes because you're transferring that knowledge over to your people. You're aligning with project outcomes. You're setting a planning schedule. You're confirming the user is ready. Now, the plan here is for the transfer of knowledge, not for the project. So you're taking transfer of knowledge and you're letting it be like its own milestone or like its own mini project. That's what you're trying to do. So under the knowledge transfer and planning, so these are some of the things that you might be doing. You might be initiating it. You might have knowledge transfer. KT is knowledge transfer milestones. You're planning for that, how they're going to learn the knowledge transfer. So you're putting them into a fail-safe situation to practice some of these things. And then, of course, you're executing this. And then of course, you're closing it out because that transfer has been there. So the only thing that's not here is, once again, evaluating it. And so that can be part of your execution before closure, but I really want to emphasize that, because how are you going to evaluate they can do it? That's what you're trying to do. Then you're delivering all of that training to your people. And so preparing the audience maybe with pre-reading or foundational materials. Now, I will tell you, the average person doesn't like to read some of the stuff for this training unless they see value for themselves. And so if they're going to be responsible for it, there's a lot more value because they're going to be the go-to person internally. So that's going to increase their mindset of, man, I got to know this because everybody's going to be calling me. You can deliver it in layers, and I think that makes the most sense because we can only hold so much information. So high-level overview, step-by-step procedure, hands-on practices, and that way people have actually done what it is we're wanting them to do. Learning different learning modes, and also encouraging active participation. Sometimes what we think is so simple on our side is not simple on their side. You'll be talking about something and somebody will say, now, what is this? And it'll be an acronym that you assume everybody knows, but they don't. And so you have to realize that, you're trying to make sure everything is going to be easy for people to grasp and understand. Mentoring and peer learning. Many organizations are trying to do this within project management specifically. So this is where you take experienced people and they guide less experienced colleagues through structured support, while peers share insight, skills, and best practices with others. And you'll see this in mentoring relationships. And so our oldest grandson was doing an internship at an engineering company this summer, and they put him on a project team. And so he was working on that project team and was so excited because he worked with another person who was the project manager, but that's what he was doing. He was being, in his internship, he was being mentored by that person. So this method fosters mutual learning, accelerates skill development, builds long-term capability by combining expert guidance with collaborative knowledge and exchange. And you have that understudy that's there, and they learn over time until finally they become the person who has an understudy because that knowledge has transferred. So that's that mentor and peer learning. And most of us have something like this in our career at some point. You've been trained by somebody. You've been mentored by someone. Storytelling, which we referred to a moment ago, this has become a bigger piece today than ever before. It conveys information, experiences, lessons through structured narratives, uses real or illustrative stories to provide context, demonstrates application, creates emotional engagement, makes complex concepts more memorable and easier to apply in practice. Now we get into a lot of situations where we have stories for fun and we have stories for the big screw ups, don't we? And so we've all had that story. Well, let me tell you what this was, and we all go through that. Okay, this is a storytelling though to explain how to make it work or how to make something, how to keep something functioning the way you want it to. This is not by accident, and it's not just not for fun. It's being purposely created so that people understand it and see it and hear what that real story is. So there's going to be a lot of content and context for this. The other is job shadowing, cross training. We've seen this. This is typically years ago was very frowned on. And what's been good is now as millennials have taken over the workplace and also has Generation X has taken over the workplace, you're starting to see most of this doesn't have the same connotation as it did 15 or 20 years ago because people are looking at this with such value. So job shadowing. So you have somebody working with you and looking at how you do some things. Cross training. I know your job, you know mine. Now, there are things that prevent some of this. So those of you who work in union settings, you'll run across some challenges with some of these things. But the ability to have cross training to where you don't have just that single point of learning or a single point of knowledge for one person. That single point of knowledge means that we're all vulnerable. Now, I know many of you have this, so this isn't a criticism as much as it is a warning for us, but that single point of knowledge and have that person leave, it can just kill your project and kill the productivity until you get someone else trained up or until you get a vendor to come in and do that. So that single point of knowledge has to be something that we have to think about, not just one person who knows how to do it, but have some type of cross training for some of that. And then verifying. We want to verify. And of course, a lot of different things happen for verification. So knowledge checks, skill demonstration, observation, feedback, shadowing sessions, user sign off. You can do a lot of these and there's still be gaps in that knowledge transfer. Because once again, sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you get in the middle of it. And so lessons learned, what worked, what could be improved, and adjusting it to future training. It might need to be that we're thinking it's going to be a one-day training, and it might need to be in smaller chunks for people to be able to grasp it. So verification of metrics, you can have a lot of different things, but it could be written or online assessments, short quizzes, skill demonstration, simulation. A lot of times just communicating with the people who are going to have the authority of following it and doing that can be a big deal. And so you're wanting to make sure that they feel comfortable in being able to do these particular things. Then transition, that you're transitioning it over to the user at that point. So it ensures the ownership of knowledge processes, repositories, smoothly handed off from the project team to the receiving team. So that receiving team could be operations, support, client, or even a new owner within that organization that's going to do the maintenance and upkeep of some of those things. And that brings you back to this one of the challenges that we've seen here with AI. AI is a maintenance heavy, retraining heavy type of project. So it's not like we're going to install it and then transfer that knowledge and that's it. All of these things we're talking about with transferring knowledge are going to happen each iteration, even after you install AI, because eventually those prompts and eventually those guidelines that you have installed for AI are not going to be doing what you want it to do later on, and it's going to have to be retrained. So it's going to be an iterative heavy, retraining heavy kind of thing, and then you're having to retrain your people again. So this is going to be something that's going to happen over and over. It's a bridge between verifying the knowledge was delivered and the actual day-to-day adoption of that knowledge by others. And then once again, as I said before, you're not going to know where the gap is until all of a sudden they get into something and they don't know what to do in that particular situation. And also in that transition, a lot of times we might do walkthroughs, establish a support protocol, a hypercare support period, a transition sign-off. The transition and the verification is going to be different depending on the type of project, because these are not all IT projects. These could be even construction projects. But the point is that what do we need to do to verify that this team now has these abilities? And then offboarding. In the offboarding phase is formal separation of individuals or teams from the project once knowledge has been fully transferred and adopted. So now that the vendor has trained all of us, now we're going to do offboarding where we're done with the trainer, done with the vendor who's been training us, and now what we're doing is we're doing it all internally. So it involves administrative, technical, relationship-oriented steps to ensure the exit is secure and complete. And so we have transferred that knowledge there. Also, with offboarding, you conduct final interviews or surveys with outgoing team members, celebrate contributions of individuals during offboarding, send formal closure emails summarizing accomplishments, and conduct post offboarding reviews. And that way, everybody knows exactly what's going on and that we're now the people who are going to be doing this and taking care of these. Structuring after action reviews. And so after you do some of this, you'll have after action reviews. What happened? Why was there a difference? What can we learn and apply in the future? Review plan versus actual. Many of you, when you're doing a retrospective or you're doing a lessons learned, you have these components in so many of those. And so might not need an after action review. But for those of you who don't do lessons learned or don't do retrospectives at the end of your sprints, this is something for you to consider bringing to the forefront, is looking and seeing how to be able to get better, because training is not going to stop. If you're running AI projects, and that's one of the things you're going to be doing, is that you've got to be able to continue to learn from these, because every so often you're going to repeat this process to build up the knowledge base of your AI tool later on. Lessons learned repository. Most of us have these in our projects, and this is one of the big things that we're going to use with our AI, is the AI will have access to these learning repositories such as this. And so capture organizational knowledge, record insights, mistakes, successes, best practices from projects, so they're not lost when team members move on. And many of you have talked about that in class. And then it enables that continuous learning improvement, reflects on past performance. Organizations can identify patterns, avoid repeating mistakes, and replicate successful approaches. But one of the big things that I see with some of this is great if it's a project we've done before. It's great if it's a project that we have expertise in. But what about new technology? What about the new projects? What about the new things that are happening and will be happening? Then what happens is we know what we did in the past, but the past might not measure up for the future. And so we are having to look at things from that innovative kind of standpoint. That's a little bit of a challenge. And then also facilitating the knowledge transfer across the teams. Now, our team has been trained by the vendor. Now, what are we going to do? Are we going to train the other teams, and so that everyone understands this? So that repository ensures learning from one project is available to other teams, departments, preventing siloed knowledge. And that's what we're trying to prevent, so that we've blended that with others. Support and decision making. The leaders and project managers can use past lessons as evidence-based input when planning new projects, allocating resources, assessing risk. And once again, when we talked about risk, if I've got a single point of knowledge on something, we have risk. Because if I lose that person, or the vendor hires that person and takes them away from us, or the person just needs to relocate or retires, we've lost that knowledge base without being able to pass it on. Benefits of the lessons learned repository: prevents knowledge gaps. We've got to be able to know this. And this is a challenge because some of our knowledge repositories are not structured the way we want them to. Not only not structured for us, it's not structured for the AI projects that or the AI tool we're going to be using later on to pull some of that information in for some of the knowledge transfer. So improves future project success, provides a reference library of proven strategies, lessons, helping teams avoid repeating mistakes. It accelerates onboarding and training. New staff can quickly learn from past projects, reducing ramp-up time. And I think all of those are true. And many of you are using this with what you know and with what your projects are like right now, and you're using it flawlessly because of this. And as new technology comes in with AI, I think then all of this will have to be rethought of how you're using it right now. It increases efficiency, saves time. Teams can reuse tested solutions instead of reinventing processes or troubleshooting the same issues repeatedly. It also can support evidence-based decision-making. Leaders can draw on documented experiences to inform risk management, planning, and strategy. And once again, I agree with all of this. Lessons learned repositories, retrospective repositories, great. But once again, it's still based on what we've done in the past, and it might not have that new information that we need for the future. And that's the piece that we've got to be able to be open to. Just because we did it this way in the past, that can help us. But what about this new, whatever this is new that we're going to be doing? All right, so let's talk about knowledge checklists. So identify all knowledge areas to be transferred. Assign responsibility to the SME, that's the subject matter expert, on each topic. Gather and update documentation or manuals. Knowledge checklist is an important piece because it gives us a chance to think about what needs to be transferred over. what training does our group need? And sometimes people are fearful to let you know they don't know how to do something, or they're going to need to be trained in something. And so it's real important to be able to make it very safe for people to be able to say, I really want to spend some time training and be with that vendor and be able to pick their brain and get some of that tacit knowledge from them. So we want this to be very, very relaxed with our people, so that they can say, I don't really know how to do this. And so that you can go that extra mile to set that vendor up with them. Working with vendors and transferring knowledge. So require vendors to show a transfer of knowledge plan. This would be in addition to, and obviously if you're in the middle of a project, this is going to be like pulling teeth to try to get a vendor to do this at this stage. But in future projects, it might make a difference to where you're asking the vendor to do a transfer of knowledge plan as some document for them to show how they're going to transfer the knowledge from that core group of vendor employees over to your users, so that they know how to be able to maintain the program, or how to be able to maintain the project after they're done. Place the transfer of knowledge as a deliverable in the contract. This will help you as well. So we have a lot of other deliverables that are very specific for certain things, for quality or regulatory type of things. Just make this one of those specifics, because once again, you're trying not to hire the vendor back. If your goal is to do it internally, then make this an actual deliverable. Set the training dates as part of the project management plan. So we're going to be transitioning this over from June 1st to June 30th. And here's our training dates. Get it on the calendar, ahead of time. Show the milestones, acceptance criteria, support on knowledge transfer, anything you need to for a metric, so that the vendor understands what they're going to be accountable in doing at this particular piece. And that will help you be able to do some of the transfer. Also, best practices in transferring knowledge. Create a document known as a definition of done. We use this on the Agile side all the time. So use a teach-back system that allows recipients to explain and perform and demonstrate mastery. Many of you have seen this. So if I'm an expert on something, I teach it, I show you, and then what happens is you teach it back to me. That's that teach back, or that demonstration back with me. And so you show me that you know how to do that while I'm watching you. You can pair team members with users, pass along knowledge through the project, use a verification, a sign-off next to the listing of each knowledge area or skill. All of those are good. They're not the problem, but the sign-off does not automatically mean the person knows. That's the negative piece of this. I would hope that the vendor would see them do this and could verify it with a sign off. But sometimes people will sign off. They'll ask the question, do you have any questions? They say no, and they'll sign off thinking, well, you didn't ask any questions. Then you must understand how to do it. Hearing it and doing it is two different things. We all know that. Hearing it and doing it is really two different things, because we don't start questioning it until we get in the middle of it. And then you start thinking, okay, now what did he say? What'd she say? And so you start replaying those roles back. And then challenges for transfer of knowledge. Time pressure. This is one of the biggest challenges, I think, for all of us. We look at it as a low priority because it's happening. We think it's happening at the end of the project. And what we assume is that we're going to learn all of these and be okay with that. So project timelines are finishing under pressure. Teams might be more focused on delivering the final product rather than the training piece. And so that training piece has to be elevated to where it's actually a deliverable. This is an important piece so that you're not locked in with having to have a vendor to do other things. And so this is actually a cost-saving initiative that we're talking about here. Limited time should never be the reason to remove this deliverable from the vendor or from the project. And those are two things that we know is happening. Vendors are saying, well, we can hit the due date if we don't have to transfer knowledge. Well, that's fine maybe for this piece of it, but that you've just become vulnerable to where none of your people really know how to fix anything or do anything with the project. Not invented here syndrome. Some are resistant to external knowledge because it does not come from inside the organization. And we all struggle with this a lot of times because of our culture and because of our internal guidelines and things. But this can be a significant barrier between the internal employee, where they refuse to follow or use knowledge after being trained. So the vendor has showed them how to do it the new way, what the purposes are, but the people inside, the users, are looking at it like, well, we'll figure it out on our own, because obviously you don't know how we do it here. And that creates a little bit of a battleground there with them accepting that training. So you have to do some of the prep work for this and making people understand how important it is for them to be able to receive this training. And so we've got to get out of this syndrome, even though there's some some truth in this syndrome. Nobody knows your organization better than you do. I don't know it as well as you do typically as a vendor. You know it better. And so that's the reason why, as we're doing this, we need both of us going together on this thing, because you understand the culture and we understand what the tool is or whatever it is we're trying to train you in. Knowledge hoarding. We're not seeing this as much. The culture has changed. With baby boomers retiring, this has shifted drastically, and that was a needed thing. Experts are reluctant to share their full knowledge. Knowledge hoarding can be due to a fear of losing one's job, lack of incentive to share, or control issues one is not willing to give up. And so we saw some of this happen across the world, actually, with baby boomers. Baby boomers did not want to share a lot of their tacit knowledge because people had been fired after they passed it on, because they could hire somebody cheaper, somebody younger, and they would bring that person in. We've not seen this as bad since millennials and Generation Xers are the dominant groups in the workplace right now. And your Zs are coming in as well. But the point is that your millennials and your Gen Xers are typically the ones in leadership. And they're much more open to coaching, much more open. And I'm speaking generally here. You point to somebody who's a Gen Xer and say, well, that person's not. And I know there's individuals, but in general, the mindset's just much better on not trying to hoard the information. And then let me show you a couple of things and talk about a couple of things as we kind of pull this together here, right here down to the wire. So next month, we're going to talk about tailoring your project plan, customizing, how customization leads to success. One of the big emphasis in 2022 change for the PMP was this idea of tailoring and customizing your project plan. And so PMI has gone in this direction. Even PMBOK 7 talks about tailoring your project. So a lot more emphasis on customization. And then we're down to the wire. We only have 3 more of these left. November, we'll talk about empowerment, shifting authority, and responsibility to the project team. This is something I know a lot of you are having to do with agile and hybrid projects. And then December 12th, we're going to talk about data-driven decision-making, leveraging metrics for success. Probably in November, Kim will be rolling out. You'll probably get an email of the new topics we're going to be talking about in 2026. Cognitive project management will be one of those because of all the new stuff that PMI is rolling out on cognitive project management to run an AI project. So that topic will be rolling out for next year as well. And so that will kind of give you some direction there. The other thing is we have one more mastermind group. Now, our mastermind group is free to anybody who wants to attend. So if you know of someone who is interested in doing this, September 15th through 19th is in just a couple of weeks. So they sign up. It's 5 days, and it's not really 5 days. It takes them about 40 minutes, 30 or 40 minutes per day to do these activities. Be a couple of videos they'll watch that talk about some stuff, and it's how to get signed up, how to qualify for the PMP certification. And then we do a drawing. Kim and my granddaughter will typically do a drawing at the end of the week. So somebody wins a free scholarship to come to a boot camp and for the PMP. And so that'll be our last one. We do 3 a year. This will be our last one for 2025. And so Mastermind Group's a good place. I do 2 Zoom calls so that people can ask questions, because once again, if you got your PMP, you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of things that you have questions on in doing this. And then we have 2 boot camps left. These are virtual boot camps. People can do these from anywhere in the world. I'll be the one leading these. And so October and then December. So those 2 will be finishing up this year, and we'll be closing all of that out. Now, let me close out with a couple of things to encourage you on a couple of things. First off, I'm sure you're excited. School has started back. So if you've got kids, you at least know where they are right now. And so they're all back in school. And as we start coming to the end of the year, a lot of times this allows us to start rethinking. So those of you who are PMPs, make sure you stay on top of your PDUs. We're seeing people who have lost their PMP because they did not get their PDUs. So that's the reason why we do this. If you are needing some extra PDUs, let me just tell you to go to our website. Every one of these webinars for the past 4 years is on our website, and every one of them will give you one PDU. And so if you're needing extra PDUs, get to our website. It's not going to cost you anything, and watch some of those and just document them and go ahead and get those PDUs in there. So don't fall behind on your PDUs. We're seeing people come to boot camps who have lost their PMP. So don't do that. Go ahead and keep those updated as well. And then we'll be bringing out some new stuff. We've got a couple of new certifications we're talking about right now that we'll be talking about probably after I pass some of them. We'll be talking about them after that, and then we'll start introducing some of the new certifications to you as we do some of that. So listen, let me bring this to a close. Listen, I hope you have had a great summer. I know you're moving into the fall time, and so I wish you well with your projects. I wish you well in transferring knowledge, and I hope this has been a blessing to you and brought some value to you today. Okay, God bless you guys. I wish you well. Stay safe as we get ready to go into the fall time. So God bless you guys. Have a wonderful week. See you. Bye now.